Yes. Okay,
Good,
Harry. Good morning. We're live
good.
and ready to roll. It's good to see you. How's the weather in Normandy?
Oh, it's beautiful. Blue skies, bright sunshine, rising temperatures. We're a little bit spoiled at the moment. Past 2 or 3 days have been wonderful. Spring, all of the flowers are out, daffodils. Gosh, it's beautiful.
Well, perhaps apart from wine, you're exporting decent weather because we've got some decent weather this morning as well.
Oh, good show, good show. Well, we're not far away from you. I mean, we're just across the channel. Really, it's a very short distance. So your weather
Yes,
pattern should be the same as ours anyway. Normally, yeah.
as if the political sphere would be as calm and beautiful, rather upheaval in British politics, Harry.
Well, there are, and the upheavals in British politics are much more noticeable these days than they are in French politics. French politics are in a disastrous state. I mean, but it's almost reached a point of being ungovernable. Very few decisions are made. It's very difficult for the federal government to get budgets through, and so people just sort of sit back and accept it as a sort of one of these typical Gallic realities. Whereas in Britain, I think at the moment it makes far greater headlines, and there's so much happening in Britain at the moment. I think politically, what with by-elections and electoral swings, political swings, of course. I mean, goodness knows where it's going to end up with whether the current Labour government swings more to the left if they get rid of Keir Starmer, or what's going to happen. It's the sense, I think, of uncertainty in Britain
Yes.
that is bringing it to the forefront.
And the news also is dictated to some extent,
Hmm.
while we would like to think that it's not, is how are the mighty fallen? Because with Andrew being toppled and Mandelson being toppled, they had plenty of enemies.
Well, I think that is actually sort of a music hall entertainment that's going on and taking the attention away from the real political issues of the moment. It's a good show. It's got all the ingredients: the scandal, sex, and you name it. And in fact, it unfortunately, well, fortunately for the Labour government, it distracts from their a lack of competency, and it's hitting the headlines. But it's today's news, tomorrow's fish and chip paper sort of thing. I think this will pass. Pass. The Mandelson scandal will continue. The Andrew scandal will continue, but they shouldn't be taking so much space in the public domain, particularly when the country's in the poor shape it's in.
Yes, except Harry, that one political commentator of some stature asked the question: can the royal family live through this? What's your view?
My view is that they have to live through it because it's part of the structure of the British nation. I do not see Britain becoming a republic just like everybody else. The monarchy, in its perfect state, and even to an extent in its imperfect state at the moment, represents the core and spirit of the British identity. And it would become a totally different nation if we dispense with the monarchy. The head of state needs to be somebody, in my opinion, somebody who's not involved in politics.
Yes.
The advice
Actually, there are 9 constitutional monarchies in the world,
oh
and
yeah,
all of them have got a stable government.
well, indeed, and of course, I think that advice we've got to give here is we've got to cut away all of the flotsam and jetsam from the royal family that distracts from the central theme of what its role is. And we've got to make sure that the people who assume that figurehead role do not get involved in politics, do not get involved in some of these political issues. I mean, one particular issue that I think is does not belong in the royal domain is climate change. It's a major political issue now, and they're getting their boots muddied in that sort of stuff. So they've got to withdraw and become a little bit more symbolic, and seek to be the embodiment of the nation and its values. So I think we need to rethink the monarchy, but I would hate to see the monarchy go, because if we just became another republic, then our head of state would be somebody who's elected, which is fine, that's democracy, but it would be loved or hated depending on which side of the political divide you were.
Yeah. I totally agree with you. I mean, I think that a constitutional monarchy is the ideal form of government, actually. Or as ideal as we can get. Harry, the government was crowing this morning on the early news bulletins that it's cut power bills by about 150 quid a year. And in it, a mention was made of wind farms and so on and so forth. But in fact, you're not a great fan of these alternative means of power generation as a major source, are you?
Well, in fact, I am. I'm very strongly against them. I think we've been peddled a line of nonsense which isn't working out. British electricity is now up to 4 times as much as you pay in the United States, and certainly twice as much as you pay in France. And that's due to all of this the so-called green movement that is seeking to produce electricity other than through fossil fuels. And yet we still produce most of our energy through fossil fuels in Britain, about 80%, I think, which means we're importing those fossil fuels and creating the environmental challenge elsewhere, simply displacing it. And so we pay, British industry is dying because of the cost of energy. So all of these moves, that the Miliband moves and ideological moves that are being made towards giving Britain zero, whatever it is, emissions by such and such a year, and 2030, is it 2035? I'm not sure. I think it's very wrong. I think we've got to retain the right balance, move towards non-polluting fuels. We've virtually got the combustion engine down to a very low polluting level. And so why we're trying to be holier than thou to the rest of the world when China is opening 3 new coal-fired power stations every week? No, it's ridiculous. I totally against the idea of paying 4 times as much for electricity as they do in the States and twice as much as they do in France. It's crazy. It's shooting ourselves in the foot.
Absolutely. Harry, you said that under the flashy headlines, there are real troubles bubbling for Britain in the political sense. What would you say is the most important couple of highlights of those issues?
Well, I think Britain needs to determine what its role is. Has it got a world role any longer, or should it be concentrating on what is good for Britain and for the people in Britain? Well, essentially, it's the latter. They're elected by the British people to govern the country in which the British people live. And I don't think it's being well governed. I think it was very badly governed by the Conservatives. They were chased out of there, and rightly so. But the current Labour government are absolutely incompetent, and they've no idea. And of course, the country is in the world sea of world nations is adrift. It's a ship adrift. So it depends how one sees the role of the nation or the role of the government. Should it be domestic or should it be international? And we've got the international scene, which is becoming very difficult at the moment. Not just with the Ukraine and the ultimate threat of Russia, but the ultimate threat of China, and of course now the Iranian situation. So should we be playing a role in that? And if we care about people being slaughtered in the streets of Iran, we should be. But no, we're hiding behind some sort of legal farce that, oh, well, you're not allowed to use British air bases to bomb Iran. I mean, my goodness. So we accept then that 30-odd thousand kids get machine gunned in the streets of Tehran. I mean, we've got to find out where our values are. It's not interfering in another nation's domestic affairs. It's investigating. It's trying to be humanistic and care about people, care about other people's lives.
Should you, in your opinion, should a government plump for one or the other, or can they make the two live in importance in parallel, international and domestic?
Well, I think in international affairs, it's a question of strength, and we're a very weak country now. We have virtually no military. We have no international clout, financial clout. So the rules are being set by those countries that do have that power. And so we're a spent force. If we want to start to participate or return to participating in world affairs, we've got to have the strength to do so. We've just let the power slip away, and maybe it's a cyclical affair. You know, we were once top of the heap, and now we're at the bottom. And what is our role? I think the Brits need to determine what their role is in society as a country, both internally and externally.
Well, much was made this morning of it being 4 years to the day that Russia invaded Ukraine. Mm-hmm. So obviously it's in people's conscience, at least for today. So where do you think that stands, Harry?
Well, I think actually I'm very positive there. I think Russia is losing this war massively. I don't know why people like Trump, well, he's a bit of an idiot, Trump, so think that Russia will eventually win because of its size. Russia is at the point of collapsing. Certainly its military effort is collapsing. They're losing 10,000 people a month more than they can recruit. Their economy is going down the tubes. I mean, they're absolutely spent force. They're having to indebt themselves to China and to a certain degree North Korea. They just can't keep going much longer. I think a slight help from the Europeans to Ukraine, and the Ukraine will win the war. The idea that Russia is winning the war is ridiculous. I think Russia is in terrible shape, and it's just the claims that they're winning that is keeping them in the. But anyway, I think once they start general mobilization in Russia, the Russians will turn against Putin, and that'll be the end of the war.
Yeah. Now, Putin is supposed to be a democratically elected president, which we all go ha ha ha. But how will public opinion alter whether he stays there, do you think? And what is public opinion on the war at the moment?
Well, a public opinion will hinge on whether there's mass mobilization, because to support the meat grinder army, this failed campaign in Ukraine is going to have to start to mobilize the true heart of Russia, which is places like Moscow and St. Petersburg, and instead of bringing in the peasants, as it were, from the far forgotten regions and that nobody really cares about. So once it starts to do that, then it'll bring the war home to real people. And if we give the Ukrainians a few long-range weapons and they start to drop a few of them into the St. Petersburg and Parisian suburbs, the people will turn against Putin very, very quickly.
So do you see that happening? I mean, I've worked in Russia, as indeed you have, and we've got a feel for the urbanite, if you like. And I find that the urbanite actually doesn't think too differently to ourselves. They have the same values, and that they try to protect the same things.
Well, when you say the urbanite, I suppose you're talking about the middle class, and Russia is a fairly advanced society in terms of its urban population, and so if they see they squeeze the middle class, they'll very quickly turn against the ruling party. Danger is, of course, always in these cases, there's a dramatic change in a totalitarian state. How are you going to replace Putin by somebody worse? But I'm not sure that in this particular case you would. So I think the sooner the war comes home to the Russian middle class, the sooner we'll see regime change and peace made. So no, I've got high hopes that the solution is at hand in Ukraine, as long as the weak-kneed Europeans and isolationist Americans don't just walk away from it. I think we have to accept our responsibility for Ukraine, because if not, if the Russians were to succeed in Ukraine, they'd just walk through the rest of Europe like a hot knife through butter.
Yes. When Putin came to power, it was amongst a lot of people that you could name: Yeltsin, Gorbachev, etc., etc. Who is a natural successor to Putin at the moment? Is there anybody obvious?
Not really, because he's made a point of eliminating any potential successors. They tend to have the habit of falling out of 7-story windows, or taking poisonous cocktails in prison compounds and things like that. So he's made very sure that there's nobody that is an obvious successor. But you cannot not imagine that there are people who are biding their time and making their plans as to how they can take over. Sadly, in a totalitarian state, many of these people will have been spawned by extreme forms of political thinking, ideologies, as opposed to being natural democrats and wanting to have an elected government. And the question is Russia, is its mindset a nation that would accept full democracy? And it's not sure. It's a big nation like that, with its history, has always been governed, has had a central government to hold all the bits and pieces together. So a question, no, the answer, basic answer to your question, there's nobody obviously comes to mind as a possible successor to Putin.
Do you think that the same thing could happen as happened in the old Yugoslavia, in the Balkans, that Russia would split up into smaller republics than it is already?
Well, the Yugoslavia had always been split up into small republics, and it was only when strong-minded people like Tito were able to weld it together into a single nation during and after the war, that it actually became an entity, a federal entity in itself. But once that strength of will, that strength of intent had gone, it broke apart into its component parts once again. And you had a tremendous difference in either in culture, languages, religion, that meant you had a series of unholy alliances, which was known as Yugoslavia, but only briefly in history. It returned to its old city-states, either totalitarian or monarchical states of history. That's the story of Yugoslavia throughout the 19th century.
Yes, but Tito was a remarkable man. I mean, he really did hold the country together. But the reason that I raised that is, once again, there was no succession.
Well, I guess, no, that's true. I don't recall him having groomed a successor, Tito. But the question is, can somebody, we get, history throws up these charismatic leaders throughout time, and can there really be a successor to them? It's not a natural function. You can name somebody, you can expect them to be, but you can't imbue the characteristics into them that make them the leader that will continue in the vein that had been started.
Yes. Zelensky is a charismatic leader. How do you rate him?
I rate him very highly. I think he's an amazing guy. From when you consider what his professional background is, he's proved to be a very inspirational leader. And I'm sure he's got his faults, like most of us have. Well, except for you and I, Keith, we don't have any faults, of course. No. But no, Zelensky is quite a remarkable leader, and he's the right man in the right place at the right time. And the sooner the weak-kneed Europeans get behind him, why should the Americans be doing all the heavy lifting? I don't know. I mean, give him the weapons to finish off the war, and that war will be over in 3 months.
Yes, I think you're right. Okay, let's switch countries then, because you made reference in passing to the fact that France is becoming rapidly ungovernable.
Well, it always was. The French are ungovernable. If you look at the history. Look, I've just had my French wife shouting from the room next door to, she doesn't appreciate my right, but she thinks I'm right anyway. The French are ungovernable. Anybody who has, General de Gaulle said you can't govern a nation that has a cheese for every different day of the year, when in fact that would have implied there were 367 cheeses. And there are, in fact, I think in France, 1,400 registered cheeses. So yes, it is a country that is very difficult to govern. The French think with their emotions, much more so than the British, who are more pragmatic. And so very different, yes. But occasionally they achieve moments of greatness, and at the moment, of course, in the rugby, in the Six Nations of rugby, yes. The French are going to really kick ass when they come up against England. So, and hopefully England will stop playing 1950s rugby and move into the modern age and play modern rugby. But we'll see that in a couple of weeks' time, I guess.
Yes, yes. I mean, it's funny that the authorities plan that as the ultimate match of the championship, thinking that the two of them are going to be very strong. And here, England are absolutely flapping.
Absolutely. Well, it's a shame, really, because England have got a wealth of talent to draw on, but they're just not playing rugby. They're playing some strange game that our grandfathers played, I think, and that it doesn't resemble modern rugby at all. Yeah.
Now, is that the coaching staff or?
Oh, it's the coaching staff, entirely the fault of the coaching staff. But it's a mindset, but it's embodied in the coaching staff, and it's nothing to take away from these people. They're delightful people, but they haven't moved with the times. They still think it's you've got to have big brawn and brain in the scrum, heads down and charge. And oh, by the way, where's the ball? Oh, we've kicked it to the other side, and they've just scored 3 tries. they're totally out to lunch. I mean, and the spirit of play, the direction of play, the theory of play is, yes, it's got to come from the coaching staff. But is it imbued in the players themselves? Are they allowed to express themselves individually, recycling the ball, passing the ball amongst them? Possession is 9/10 of the game in rugby, and yet we've got these very clever players constantly kicking the ball to the other side. Yeah. And at that level of rugby, rarely do people drop the ball, and so you're simply given possession to the enemy. And then, when they realise that, well, they won't realise it with the coaching staff they've got. They'll have to change the coaching staff entirely, or hire the French coaching staff.
How do you rate the coaching staff of the Italians, who have certainly come a long way this season?
They've got an Argentinian coach, I believe he is, and he is an Argentina has sort of moved up the world rankings tremendously in these past years. And so if you see the way the Italians play, they too will give England a very good run for their money. They're a totally different style of play. you saw how the Italians, even though they were in the end fairly well beaten by the French, but they played the French at their own game. And there were times when they were very threatening, and they did score. And I think, given the standard of play of Italy, Italy would beat England right now.
I think so too. I think Italy could well do it coming third.
Mm. And there's no shame in that. There's no shame in that. It's simply
not.
that England is not playing modern rugby.
Anyway, moving on or moving back to the French rugby side, what about the French political leaders?
Well, Macron is pretty much a spent force. He's now a lame duck president, as one would say. The politics have taken a swing very much to the right in France. There's a very strong possibility that a right-wing government will be elected next year in 27, I believe the next presidentials are. And so, he's a spent force. And there will be a combination of everybody ganging up against the right wing to try and stop them being elected. But I think there's a very good chance that it will go that way. And I think a very similar move will happen in the UK.
The French elector is a very strong-minded person, isn't he?
Who, sorry? Who is?
The French elector.
Yes, and the French are, as I say, are very strongly emotional people, but they're also very practical people as well. And so, no, I can. They've had enough of this nonsense, and I think they will. They're wanting to see a bit of order put back into society, and it'll be a very tight race. But I could well see this young man, Jordan Bardella, being elected as president.
Right, let's move to the United States. State of the Union speech. All is well in the United States. The Republican Party, along with the president, are doing the best job ever. Standing ovation. What do you make of it?
Well, he's just given his State of the Union address, one of the longest State of the Union addresses, I think, in history. It lasted almost 2 hours, an hour and 10 minutes, and he boasted of all of his achievements. And there's no doubt that they were achievements, but he's such a clumsy, dislikable character that he's become his own worst enemy. After this, frail and useless old geezer Biden, I mean, he should have been a breath of fresh air, but he's so full of himself and that is turning the nation against him. That if there's a danger that exists in the United States, it could be some form of civil war, not in the 61-65 sense, but I think America is going to go through a very dangerous period. Now, there's a question as to when Trump goes, and he'll go sooner rather than later, I think. Who will take over? Will there be another massive swing to the left, to the Democrats, or will there be a continuity with people like Vance, or even a middle of the road person like Rubio? It's an interesting situation, and I think what will determine the outcome is how the next few weeks and months play out. The Iranian question, I think, will largely determine the direction that American politics takes. If the current initiative succeeds and they do put Iran back in its place and stop it being the world's leading terrorism state, it will be a major victory for the people in power in the States at the moment. And not just talking Trump, I'm talking about the people behind all of that who actually run the show, the people we never really see. So I think that would be a very settling influence in the United States, which we need to because they're still the world's most powerful nation. And as long as they get their calls right, I think we live under the safety umbrella of the Americans, and think we have to accept that reality.
Yeah. Despite his bluff and bluster.
Basically, I'm hopeful that they will. Anytime, any day now, they'll launch the attack on Iran. And is it going to be tactical strikes, or is it aimed at regime change? That's going to be the big question. Is it going to be a band-aid solution, or is it something which will solve the problem definitively and give the Iranian people, who are a very, very sophisticated society, a democratic chance to rebuild their nation? Let's hope they can.
Now, despite his bluff and bluster, Trump is a very cunning man. Is there any suggestion that he's working in the background for his much cherished third term?
Oh, no, I don't think the American Constitution would not allow it. I mean, Thomas Jefferson and Morgan and the rest of them, when they put that together, they were a bunch of smart cookies, and they made sure that this couldn't happen. And that's not just a question of third term, but there are many other checks and limits on the American Constitution. It's a brilliant piece of, and certainly since it's been amended over the years to make it even more watertight. No, I don't think there's any chance of him running a third term. Anyway, somebody will probably bump him up before then. Yeah.
So what are the issues, apart from Iran, facing Trump, particularly domestically?
I'm sorry, I missed that, Keith.
What are the issues facing Trump, particularly domestically?
Well, I think it is his own worst enemy. Is just quite a detestable character as an individual. He's got some good ideas, and I think his heart is in the right place, but his head is somewhere else. I mean, he just thinks of himself. He sees himself as superhuman, and he's not. He's a very frail, fragile character, and good and bad, a mixture of good and bad all at the same time. No, I think Trump's days are numbered. And no, he'll see out his mandate. And I don't think he will be assassinated or anything like that. There are all sorts of people trying to do that. But I think in the next up to the midterms, he'll do what he can. But after that, he too will become lame duck. And I think we should be thinking beyond Trump now already.
Yes, I agree with you. Who?
Well, J.D. Vance is the logical successor, though. I think probably the Americans will be ready for something softer, so they would go for Rubio, and we don't know who. I don't think Newsom from California for the Democrats is he's just a poster boy, and he's taken California down the woke route, and that is a spent force now. So I think probably you'll have a Republican continuity of some sort or another, middle of the road. Somebody like Rubio would be my guess.
And will that mean America changing direction over a lot of international affairs?
Oh no, I don't think they will. I think because the main issues that face America won't change, and therefore that wouldn't require any major change in American policy. They've got to confront the expansion of China. They've got to solve the immigration problem, which Trump has been trying to do in a very clumsy way. But these problems won't go away. They have to be resolved. And so no, policy will pretty much remain the same. And you've got to remember that the pendulum in American politics is already to the right. In France, it's to the left. In Britain, it's about in the middle. But in America, America is to a large degree a right-wing inclined company. It's a free country. It's a free-thinking country. And they don't like too many rules and regulations. They like to be able to get on with their lives and freedom to decide. And so, no, I think we're going to have a continuity of not Trump policies, but let's just call them American policies, American thinking. And
tariffs part of American thinking, do you think?
Who is?
Tariffs? Import and export tariffs?
Export? Sorry.
Tariffs. Duty.
Tariffs?
Tariffs.
Challenge?
No. Tariffs. T-A-R-I.
Oh, tariffs. Tariffs. I'm sorry. No. Well, this, Trump has been wielding this tariff question as almost if it's a personal weapon that he has at his disposal. But the Supreme Court has slapped him down on that. We're going back to the Constitution that you referred to a moment ago. The Constitution clearly states that taxes, when tariffs are taxes, are the entire prerogative of Congress. And they're certainly not at the disposal of the President of the United States, except in emergency situations. And he's been using that clause as if there's an emergency to pass these tariffs or to inflict these tariffs on the rest of the world. Well, he has no right to do that, and so Congress he can't fight that. He'll have to fight. The Supreme Court has ruled on that, and as it should do, and Congress will exert its right to impose the tariffs or taxes that it wishes to. And if there's a change in the midterms, and he loses majority, so in the House, so that'll put an end to all of this tariff question.
Yes, but even as late as last week, he used the threats of increased tariffs when we did something that he didn't like.
Well, that was a defense. That was a knee-jerk reaction against the new Supreme Court ruling that he wanted to show that he still has the power to do that. But no, I think he's going to be slapped down, and that's again where he's allowing his egotistical thinking to dominate his common sense. I mean, well, if he's got some common sense, he's got some good ideas, Trump, but he's such a terrible character that. Mm-hmm.
Well, now let's move across to Asia. Mm-hmm. My favorite economy, and the one that you, of all people, understand better than most, is the Japanese. Mm-hmm. How are they doing?
Well, I think they're on the way up again. They're finally shedding their pacifist mantle that they assumed after World War II. And they're rebuilding their defenses because of the imminent clash with China. And they are quite a remarkable country. And they're a country which everybody talks about Japan being the world's most indebted country, which in terms of figures, yes, they are. But most of that debt is held by the Japanese themselves. So in a world where you've got military and financial power, they're very strong in both contexts. I think Japan is a country that is once again going to exert its regional hegemony.
And do you see any threat, or are they likely to stay kind of disposed towards the West?
Oh yes, I think they are a Western country. Japan is very much of a Western country, historically so. It was in the middle of the 19th century, what is known as the Meiji period, the Emperor Meiji fell in love with everything that was European. And he Europeanized industry, he Europeanized the military. He sent all of his young officers to Sandhurst or West Point and that sort of thing. And no, it's a very westernized nation with, obviously, Oriental and Asian traditions. And having taken the best out of both worlds, but they developed some of the industrial systems which were the envy of the Western world. Now, Japan is in a category all by itself. It's the perfect mix of Western and Oriental thought.
Now, some of the countries around it, with the possible exception of China, are less stable. Where do we see the North Koreans at the moment, because we haven't heard much about them, and he hasn't let off any rockets recently.
Well, North Korea is a wild card, obviously, and a particularly dangerous wild card now they've got nuclear toys and that sort of thing. But I don't think that they're intent on imposing their ideology on the rest of the world. They're simply elbowing their way to a seat at the big table, and they've more or less got that now. So I don't see them as an ideological threat in the way that I see the Chinese as an ideological threat. Mind, it's the Chinese leadership. And the Chinese leadership is not as solid as it appears from the outside, in my opinion. It's a huge country to try and keep together. And you've got this enormous disparity between the cities and the countryside. So it's always prone to some form of revolutionary change. Thereby, another country that requires almost a totalitarian government to keep the pieces together, or a charismatic government, just like Tito did with Yugoslavia, or Russia is kept together because of either some high form controlled central government. Same with China. So once China gets rid of its ideological impediment, I mean, it's not a communist country anymore. It's a capitalist country, and they're simply seeking to dominate the world market. I feel.
I was going to ask you.
They're not on a political mission anymore. I don't think the Chinese.
Would economic threats change the leadership, you think?
Oh, indeed, yes. Money and sex control the world. I mean, so in this case, we're talking money, and yes, of course, it's a big motivator. It's one of the biggest motivators there is. So they'll continue to try and expand and capture world markets, and.
But you hinted that you see weaknesses in the Chinese economy as well.
Well, the Chinese economy is not in a strong position. They're highly indebted too, and they've got all sorts of demographic challenges, such as a shrinking population and inequality, as I say, between the city and the countryside. And there's extreme poverty still in great parts of China. There hasn't been an equal distribution of wealth, so you've got all of a minefield of problems that can occur when a nation is still in its evolutionary stage, which China is, which China perhaps has always been throughout its life. But anyway, that's looking at the situation at the moment. It's by no means a settled environment, and it has tremendous challenges facing it. Shrinking population, the emergence of India next door. I mean, passing it population-wise and industrial capacity-wise eventually, I would think. China's got its problems, and its real enemy could be adjacent to it, in other words, in the Asian context as opposed to America, and its real problem could be itself, knowing how to manage and keep a big nation like that welded together with a single purpose. That's their challenge. It's almost an internal challenge.
Now, we don't talk much, although it is really supposedly the up-and-coming economy, about India. And having spent some time in India, I must confess that on the surface, the fabric looks very, very thin. Mm-hmm. In fact, it's become a powerhouse, hasn't it?
Well, it is, and I mean, it's when India awakens. I mean, and we can't talk about India without talking about Africa. If Africa ever awakens, my goodness, and gets its act together, that's going to be another powerhouse. But certainly, in terms of evolution, we've seen how China's forged ahead. In India, fast playing catch up. Japan being reborn, the potential that exists in Africa, the centers of power and energy in the world, energy to improve, energy to move forward, not the traditional places we think of. And we as Europeans tend to think in the past, but our day in the sun is gone. We're just a faded society now, and a twilight society in Europe. And I think the main thing to do is to watch rugby and drink beer now.
Yeah. But having worked in Africa as well, my immediate impression is the same as India. The fabric doesn't look that strong. But and of course, the corruption is widespread and huge. Can they overcome that to become real powerhouses?
I think they will. I think they eventually will. It won't become one single economy, one mass economy overnight. That's going to take several generations to happen. But no, I mean, they have the resources. They've got incredibly rich resources and minerals and rare earth materials and all sorts of the things that are needed in modern society. So again, it's a powerhouse in waiting. But the world has always been like that. It's always evolved, and parts of it have come together. I mean, if you take the history of Europe in the Middle Ages, it was turmoil. We were always at war with each other, or off on crusades and doing this and doing that. It was a bloodbath in Britain, right until the time of our grandfathers. That's how recent it all was. Certainly our great-grandfathers. Our great-grandfathers takes us back to Napoleonic times, and it was a pretty messy place around. Everybody beating up on each other then, and who would ever thought they would have come together in a single European Union? But even now, that's a little bit of a myth. Of course, I'm not a staunch European in the Brussels sense of the word. I think that's just a talking shop where everybody, spouts a lot of nonsense. And
yes, in fact, if anything, it weakens the whole concept, doesn't it, of Europeans?
Absolutely, yeah.
Let's just go back to India and Africa for a moment. I mean, based on the fact that economies drive empires, what is the basis of the Indian empire? What is the basis of the Indian economy? I mean, I know we all think about computers and computing. What else?
Well, it depends how you evaluate an economy. If you take something like the United States economy, it is a self-supporting economy. You could almost close the doors in the United States, and it could live quite handily by itself. It's got all the materials, resources that it requires, and it could sell. Its market could be internal. Other countries, other economies are based simply on export. China, for instance, is based almost entirely on cheap manufacturing and export and volume exportation to other countries. And it's at the mercy of the markets of those other countries. And very often it has to dump things in at a very low market value, whereas it needs still to develop its internal market. Too much of China's economy is external and not internal. So it depends which kind of economy that you've chosen to have. Many of the what's a simple example would be the Scandinavian economies. They've got very strong internal economies. They do export, and they export successfully in goods and materials that are specific to them. But they could very easily exist comfortably without exports. They could live on their own, they're complete entities within themselves. So we're comparing apples and oranges here. You cannot compare the American economy with the Chinese economy. They're totally different models.
Right. Okay. Well, I've highlighted perhaps one driver of the Indian economy. Where do you see the African strength coming from?
Well, the African challenge, of course, is that many of these nations are separate, and ethnically or tribally, and can they ever get together and form a united African? Well, we have the African Congress, which they're trying to move together as a unit in that sense, but it's going to be a generation or two before all of the old tribal hostilities and ethnic barriers are removed, and it won't become one big country. It won't become Africana, as it were. We're looking at probably, I don't know, even at the rapid pace of change we have these days, we might be looking at a couple of 100 years before it truly gets its act together. And the pace of change is so rapid now that other problems could well intrude before then. We have to now start to ask a lot of series of moral questions now. Will humanity in its present context still exist in a couple of 100 years' time? We seem to be heading towards the precipice in so many ways, and more people armed with their finger on the nuclear trigger. It's a question of how long society as we know it will be able to exist in its present form.
And are you optimistic or pessimistic?
I'm a little bit, well, both really. It will not continue to exist in its present form. Already we see values changing, fraying at the edges, extremisms, ideologies replacing benign religions like Christianity and Buddhism. So I think we are in a deteriorating world, but the idea of life surviving, I strongly suspect, without any anthropological knowledge to base this on at all, is that society has existed many times since the world begun and has been wiped out on different occasions, and yet has come back. It's come back in the form of everything from daffodils to you and me. I mean, look at some. We do know that there was a period when we had dinosaurs, and have you? Well, they could have been long before the dinosaurs. There could have been other forms of life, and
now we're trying to reproduce them in Jurassic Park.
Absolutely, and if we want to stretch our imaginations, who's to believe that we are the only people occupying the planet?
Yeah.
Now that would suggest that there are other people around us in the room behind you, or in the sky above you, on the earth below you. Now, in that case, why don't we meet them? Well, the answer probably is that they don't even exist in our dimensions. We exist in 5 dimensions, and they maybe exist in maybe a 17 dimensions, and none of those dimensions correspond to our dimensions. So we'll never meet them. We'll never know they're there.
Wow, you're getting very philosophical now.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. Well, isn't that what happens when sometimes these dimensions accidentally touch, and there's a little glimpse into another world, and that explains some of the strange things that happen in society, ghosts or people from outer space.
Sure.
Well, maybe they've always been there, and you bump into one of them in the elevator and say, sorry, sir. He raises his hat and goes on his way. No, but they don't even know we're there.
Well, Harry, let us have ships that pass in the night for the moment. What do you anticipate? Because they say a week is an age in politics. What do you anticipate that this time next week, when we get together, that will be in front of us as important issues? Well,
I think that hopefully the Mendelssohn and Andrew situation would have settled down in the United States. The French will have started to apply some form of new budgetary administration. Trump will have done his number on Iran, and I think there's more chance of him doing it than that as not doing it. I think the delay is simply being to allow him to get sufficient defensive weaponry in place. to ensure that Iranian retaliation doesn't do much collateral damage. And what else? The Olympics will be over. Back to the rugby. We should be next week's time. We should back to the final denouement of the Six Nations rugby tournament.
A weekend off this weekend.
Yeah, and it should be very interesting. Yeah, I think we can look forward to a French victory in the Six Nations. I shall eat humble foie gras if it's not if it's not the case. But you never know. Maybe a chance of England getting their act together and figuring out that the game of rugby has changed and therefore they should update it. Start handling the ball again, passing it around, and above all keep possession.
I keep on going to the Black Horse.
Yeah.
Saturday, sitting in front of the fire and thinking, is today going to be the day?
Yeah, but I think it's a good question. A week is a long time in politics, as you say, and I think this is going to be a very important week. We're going to see a lot of changes this week. I don't think that because the too many things are reaching a peak point in terms of Newtonian physics. I think we're going to have pressures that are about to explode in world politics and changes. I think this time next week we'll be in a different world to the one we are now.
Well, join Harry and I this time next week at 9:00 GMT on Mirador television, and let's see whether his predictions are correct. Harry, look forward to seeing you next week.
With pleasure, Keith. Goodbye, everybody.
Yeah. Bye. Right. Harry Atherton. And how did I move out of range of the camera? Oh, I see. I changed the inadvertently. I changed the way that we're looking at things. Never mind. And I've got to get rid of that reflection while we're on the air. It's a bit of an unsettled period for Mirador at the moment, but we're slowly coming out of it. And hopefully you'll see some very positive changes in the next couple of weeks or so, and then we should enter into 4 weeks, well, actually 12 weeks, 3 months of fairly solid programming. And as long as we can conquer the technical side, we're taking steps in the background to do that. We should be back on song. So stay with us through the bad times, because the good times are on the way. I'm Keith Hayes. Next week or the week after, we should have a new face on screen at this time. Abigail, a draper, but when you look at her CV, you say, how the hell can she be called a draper? She's a lady of many parts, and she will be taking her place in the scheme of things, and bringing you some information, some chat, and so on, which I think you'll find entertaining and informative. And then we've got, hopefully, I think it's Ellie, who helps you in the home, as well as an entrance of Maggie's wines to help you choose either an expensive wine, an inexpensive wine, one in the middle, one to suit your taste, one that you grit your teeth at, or whatever. And we also have Teddy, who already is introducing a Tuesday program of chat, and hopefully we're going to have some phone in there once we can get over the technology. We're not having much luck with the authorities helping us on that one. But we'll get there. And we will maintain our demeanor of being mature. Mature is the word. That's the in word. We don't call ourselves old anymore. We call ourselves mature. Right. So we won't be back today, but we will be back tomorrow, first thing in the morning. And after that, we're not quite sure what's happening until the week after next, when we shall have another good framework in place, hopefully. Right, until then, toodle, 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 pip. And have a good day.